Okay, another networking issue. So Merlin Illuminati. Suspicious IP logs from the US in my website that coincide with timing of my own. I don't live in the US. Suspicious IP logs from the US in my website that coincide with the timing of my own. I don't live in the US. This is what happens. Any clues why Verizon and Ashburn would be related? Okay. Well, I agree with him. I was about to say something very similar. So, well, is your ISP Verizon? If so, suspicious IP logs from the US and my website that coincide with the timings. Well, is your ISP Verizon? If so, then the public IP address that you pull, regardless if it's static or not, or dynamic, regardless if it's static or dynamic, can be pulled from a server from a different country. Thus, can be pulled from a server from a different country. Also, your traffic could, well, okay, we'll just leave it at that, because that's essentially what's happening. So basically, okay, so the way internet service provider companies work is they basically have a pool of IP addresses, and they basically give you an IP address for a certain amount of time. And as long as your modem doesn't actually reboot, you keep that public IP address. And essentially, you know, after a certain amount of time, they can time you out. But if you have a site, like this person here has a site, and they don't have a static IP address, they have a public IP address, and they're just looking at the IPs and people that are hitting them, or they're just pulling up an IP address that they currently have. I'm guessing coincide with the timing of my own. So I don't know if this person is looking up people's IP addresses that they see actually hitting their server, or if they're just saying, hey, why does my IP address belong to this particular country when I don't live in this country? Well, is your ISP Verizon? If so, the public IP address that you pull, regardless if it's static or dynamic, can be pulled from a server from a different country. Also, are you just looking at the traffic hitting your website, or are you referring to the IP you have been given from the internet service provider? Yeah. So we'll go with that. So is your ISP Verizon? If so, the public IP address that you pull, regardless if it's static or dynamic, can be pulled from a server from a different country, which is a thing. You know, depending on where the public IP pool is, it can actually show you in a different country. Like I know plenty of internet service providers that have IPs that they've either purchased recently or that they've just purchased in general that may be registered to a totally different country, and it happens. It happens a lot. Also, and then there's also some that purchase IP addresses, public IP addresses that they add to their pool later on that are malicious, or they were once malicious, or they belong to a public IP address of a company that were using it in malicious ways, and they have been blacklisted from certain companies, in which case now it belongs to this particular company. So then people have to go back in and remove it from the blacklist. So I've had it happen both ways. Also, are you just looking at the traffic hitting your website, or are you referring to the IP you have been given from the internet service provider? And yeah, Ashburn is a major hub for internet traffic due to its many data centers. Andrew Blum characterized it as a bullseye of America's internet. I like his answer. Yeah, so your traffic can also come from there, but I'm not sure what you're trying to do. I'm not sure if you're basically just looking at the traffic that's hitting your firewall, or sorry, traffic that's hitting your server and getting concerned, or are we talking about an IP address that you were given from an internet service provider? I don't know. And because of that, it changes the answer a little bit, but whatever.